Hello, all. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. I'm Teresa Lyson, a business solutions consultant at NICC. Today's topic is Who You Are Affects How You Work, Communicate, and Lead with Tina Bakehouse. Tina Bakehouse started her own company, Tina B LLC, to provide intuitive communication, consulting, and coaching to guide heart-centered leaders and organizations internationally to communicate more effectively. Tina B is a published author of Discovering Our Magnetic Speaker Within and has more than 20 years of teaching communication in theater, including 10 years at Creighton University. Previously, Tina B worked in human resources, nonprofit communication strategy, and marketing and storytelling for a bank. She holds certifications in holistic psychotherapy, Keirsey temperament, 5 levels of improvisation, sorry about that, and has a master's degree in communication studies from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and 2 bachelor's degrees from the University of Northern Iowa, one in communication studies and psychology, and the other in English, teaching, speech, and theater. As a former Walt Disney cast member, Leadership Iowa participant, and TEDx speaker, Tina B is passionate about educating others to become more self-aware and enhance their authentic speaker style through her individual coaching series, transformational team building workshops, and keynotes in improvisation, storytelling, temperament, and communication to analyze speaker style, craft clear content, and deliver messages that matter on any stage. If you have questions throughout Tina's presentation, please add them to the Q&A or chat box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll save time at the end of the webinar to answer those. Tina will be having us participate a little bit in the chat today, so if you would, please find that and be ready to interact with us through that format. And with that, I will turn it over to Tina.
Thank you, Teresa. I want you all to imagine that you're in a canoe out in the middle of the ocean, and your boat is starting to sink. And you have 4 items in that canoe. And unfortunately, you can't pick all of these 4 items to keep. You only get to select one. And so I'm going to list these 4 items, and I want you to pick only one. And we're going to work with that later on in this talk today. So the first is your grandfather's tackle box. That's one of the items. Item number 2 is a journal that you've kept for 10 years, documenting experiences, thoughts, reflections. The third item is a GPS. And the 4th item is a 6-pack of your favorite beverage. In my case, I love herbal tea. So it's your grandfather's tackle box, your journal, a GPS, or a 6-pack of your favorite beverage. Now just go with your gut, don't overanalyze it. And I want you to write that down just on a little Post-it note or scratch sheet of paper. Well, there's a reason why I'm having you think about this, because it links to the idea of temperament. And how many of you have heard of this word? It's a word that's been thrown around, and you've probably thought it's engaged in personality with all these different tools that we have from Myers-Briggs, predictive index, emergenetics, and more. And so David Keirsey, who's a social psychologist, actually came up with his form of temperament. And it's not a new thing. In fact, Hippocrates in 370 BC looked at what is it in our blood, in our genetic makeup that makes us who we are. So think of personality as this idea of nature. You're born a certain way, and that's about 40 to 60% of just your natural inclinations, your hardwired way of being, plus nurture or your environment, who you're around, the people that you live with, the people who educate you, work with, etc., and how that impacts your being. So it's nature and nurture, temperament and character that make up personality. And so Keirsey found that as individuals, what set us apart from animals is that we use words and tools to achieve our goals. And we do so differently. And so I want you to imagine for just a moment that I were to give each and every one of you an acorn. and that you were to plant in the fertile soil of Iowa, some of the best and richest soil in the world. You add fertilizer and water, you talk to it, you take care of it. And then what does that acorn become? A beautiful oak tree. Now, I want you to travel west to Colorado, to an arid climate, and take another acorn, maybe even that same one. And what would happen? You dig into the soil, it might be a little rocky. You have to water it a little bit more. It's in more of an arid climate, and yet it still turns into an oak tree. Maybe not as thriving because of its environment, but the DNA of that acorn is the same as the one in Iowa. So today, my purpose is to entice each and every one of you as business leaders, owners, and managers, whatever your role may be, to have a better understanding of what does it mean in terms of who we are. What are our strengths? Because the more self-aware you become, the more you can be aware of the other to enhance your organizations, to grow your business. And so I want you to connect with this idea of self at a beautiful level. And then we'll focus in on one main idea, and that is temperament, which is those hardwired natural inclinations of how you work, communicate, and lead. So please get out that little scratch sheet of paper, and I want you to look at what you wrote down. Now, the first one, I want those of you that chose Grandpa's Tackle Box to put Tackle Box in the chat. And I want you to put next to that a word or a phrase that really inspired you to choose Grandpa's Tackle Box. So what word or phrase comes to mind with why you chose the tackle box? And I'll give you just about 30 seconds to respond to that in the chat. And then Teresa, if you would be so kind as to read a couple of the examples of words and phrases as they filter in. I would love to hear what participants have come, those who selected the tackle box to take out of the canoe or to keep in the canoe and toss the others in the ocean.
Yeah, we've got a couple that say survival, potential ability to maintain a food source. Rachel says practical tools.
Hey, great. Those are some good words and phrases. And when I think of the tackle box, this is one core value. And think of if you selected that, and this again is an extended metaphor of this idea of getting the work done, sense of getting it done, the work, the responsibility, the duty, as well as a form of sense of belonging. I don't know if anybody selected the tackle box because it was Grandpa's tackle box, because there's that connection with Grandpa. So I want you to imagine just for a moment, I'm going to bring up an example of a client of mine named Katie, who's a financial planner. And Katie was this quintessential tackle box selector. And what kind of communication leadership style might she be like? Well, she definitely is very sequential with how she thinks, with how she communicates, and with making a list with, okay, I like to check off those things just to say I got it done. She also is very cooperative and cares about how others work and get along. And she is one of those that is definitely very, in addition to cooperative, much more concrete with her word choice. What she sees and experiences, she's able to put words to. So if the room is hot or cold, or if the data is not showing up to par what the organization needs, she can express that. Now, this particular temperament also is a helper and has a value of helping and works hard. And so when she came to me, she wanted help on communication and communicating with more confidence and clarity and having that sequential means of how do I network and talk about my business. So think of this particular tackle box core value is about sense of belonging, responsibility, and duty. So the second item those of you that selected the journal, I would like for you to put a word or phrase as to why you selected the journal. And Teresa, once you see a couple of those, I would love for you to read those aloud to me, specifically why the journal. I see the word wisdom. Yes.
Memories, ability to remember what I have done, where I'm going, and with who. Knowledge.
Ooh, that is really great. Where I'm going and with whom. That is exactly this third or second temperament in terms of core value is the idea of meaning and significance, specifically identity and awareness of the self and the journey is important. And so when I think of Heather, who was a CEO client of mine, she was very abstract, loves metaphors, loves analogies, loves big picture focused ideas, still similar to the other in terms of cooperative, very ethical, cares about getting it right, and can be somewhat emotional and passionate about the ideas of what is and moving and motivating her team forward with shifting to building on the business. And in addition to cooperative and abstract communicator, very random with how she thinks and how she communicates and how she does and behaves. And so it's leaning into the differential that makes her different than the other, which is random versus sequential and abstract versus cooperative. So the third of these items is the GPS. I would love for those of you who selected the GPS to put in the chat why the GPS, a word or phrase that comes up. And Teresa, if you want to share when you see a couple of those to share those aloud.
They're coming in. Guidance to the unknown. Brandy says wayfinding, direction, a lot of directions.
Okay,
Want
great.
to be found.
Yes, wanting to be found, wayfinding. And I love this. The core value for this particular temperament would be knowledge and competence, clarity on efficiency, like getting from point A to point B in the best, most efficient manner, doing things that are efficient, getting the most and best expert information. And so I want you to picture a client of mine, Becky, who came to me with what's next for my next phase of life. I know that I want to speak. I want you to get me there quickly. And I know that you've been doing this for a long time. Don't give me the fluff. Give me the essential strategies, very strategic in nature, wanting boom, 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 let's get it done and do it efficiently and quickly because I don't know how, and I'm seeing you as that person. And so similar to the first temperament, this particular one thinks and speaks very sequentially. And different than the others and similar to the second one is abstract, loves philosophies, loves to talk in metaphor and see the possibilities of what is out there. And sometimes because the theory and the way of being can be so strong, they can come off maybe a little bit cold, not meaning to, but because they care so deeply about efficiency and getting that utilitarian focus of going from point A to point B. So I want to sum up just briefly what we've talked about thus far in terms of thinking, behavior, speaking. The first tackle box was much more into sequential way of thinking and speaking, more concrete with words and observables, and very cooperative in nature. Contrast that with the second journal, and that individual would be much more into abstract language, random thinking and speaking, and also similar cooperative with others. And then this third with the GPS selection is again different and similar than the other two. Very strategic with wanting it sequential with how they speak, think, and be. And they are a lot more utilitarian, less so, and not about the cooperative people, but getting it done. And in addition to sequential, they're abstract with their language. Lastly, the beverage. Who picked the 6-pack of their favorite beverage that they're like, yes, that's what I want to keep in the canoe? And Teresa, you can share those when they pop up. Did anybody pick the beverage?
I'll get it started. I pick beverage. For me, it's comfort.
Comfort, excellent. I think that's great.
I might be the only one.
And hey, that's all right. Some in the past have mentioned that, hey, why stress out? Just relax and kind of, figured out hydrate myself. And I would say that the 6-pack person would definitely like this idea of making an impact with the freedom of I'm not going to be controlled by this situation. I'm going to be free to just float and be in the present moment. And so similar to the others, they are more random with what they say, do, and how they be. They can be much more utilitarian, like the previous GPS individual, where they care about just getting what's effective from point A to point B, maybe not as cooperative, just kind of figuring out to make that impact. And in addition, similar to the very first tackle box kind of temperament, they tend to be a lot more concrete with their words, what they see right in front of them, like with those 5 sensory details of their experience of the person or what situation they are in. So I had a supervisor / boss that hired me also to do some training for the organization. And something that sticks out about this particular individual is he was very generous, very big heart, but also in addition to his generosity, really liked the idea of his organization to be the best. Not that the other 3 do not, but to make impact, and with the training wanted to know, okay, how can we have a better understanding and me accept me, you accept you? And he would make big decisions quickly just to make impacts and maybe not think about the aftermath so much. So I want you to step back and reflect for just a moment on, granted, this is an extended metaphor of what's that last thing in the canoe. And it's looking at core value of whether it's a freedom to act, or it's knowledge and competence, or it's understanding the self-identity and journey, or a sense of belonging and responsibility and duty. We all have that one core value that impacts our choices of why we communicate the way we do, how we behave, and how we lead others, because we all are leaders. So whether you're random or sequential, cooperative or utilitarian, or you do all kinds of abstract or concrete communication, you have preferences. And think of animals in the wild. A fox absolutely is called to invade a chicken coop, whereas a beaver builds a dam. You would never see a beaver going into a chicken coop or a fox building a dam. It's not in their innate nature. And so we are currently here in springtime, and I can't help but think of the wild rose. And as I look at this rose, all of us are wild roses where we have unique potential. We have this ability to blossom, to grow, and to be able to plant that seed in our teams and in others. And so it's really important to first be aware of yourself, to trust the self, trust how you show up, trust your communication choices, and feel natural, because then once you are aware of why you be the way you be, you're able to cultivate that in others. And that's the power I feel of when we lean into the self. We are much more aware to accept the other. And then we get these magical, fabulous organizations that have clear communication, that have growth, and that we see full, rich diversity. Just like when you look at the soil, the most fertile soil doesn't just have one kind of plant. It has many. It has all kinds of different types of roots that can add nutrition to the soil. So ask yourself, when you think about how can you add nutrition to yourself, to care for yourself, to advocate for yourself and your energy, and take care of that, as well as for your team members, the people whom you work with within your organization. I love what Kiersey talks about when we think of individuals and how they are in the workplace. The most impactful, strong organizations and the best leaders match talent to task. So if you can see and hear and be with the other, then you can draw that out of them and they can show up and be able to do the tasks at hand that they are called to do, that is more natural in their DNA, that they don't have to effort so much, that they can make those impacts, bring in strong sense of belonging, or identify the culture in a way that's beautiful and tap into the knowledge and confidence and competence in the most efficient, effective way. And when you do that, then you truly can communicate for results. And so I would love each and every one of you to, at the core, ask yourself, what is important to you? What is important to your team, to the people you work with? What is important to the organization? How can you align in a way to do the dance of conversations, have emotional and communication intelligence to then move forward, to go and grow in a meaningful and powerful way? And with that, I want you to think of how it's much more the silver rule rather than the golden rule. You want to do unto others as they would want to be done unto them. What questions do you have for me? I would love to answer any questions. And as you're thinking about that, because I want to add value to your organizations, I also want to add an offer that I am Kiersey Temperament certified and happy to give a 20% discount for a virtual or in-person workshop or consulting if you're curious as to which specific temperament and to get a deep dive analysis. I'd be happy to do that, because I really do feel the more you're aware of your communication style, your leadership style, you can capitalize on those strengths and then see those differences and celebrate those differences, because the same thing can happen to one person and you at the same time, and you react very differently. And it's responding rather than reacting that can be very powerful in terms of having harmonious, beautiful relationships to build business.
Thank you, Tina. Go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll answer those before we log off. You will see a brief 3-question evaluation pop up on your screen. If you would please take time to answer those questions quick before you log off today, we would appreciate it. This is a small, like Tina mentioned, small part of what she has to offer. So if you are interested in any more information on Tina and bringing her into your company to take a deeper dive, please reach out to me or Sarah Lenson here, and we'll get you connected with Tina and get you some more information on that. I'm not seeing any questions right now.
Well, and something to think about too is when you think about how an organization functions, people ask me many times, is temperament, does it change over time? And I will answer, and I don't ever want to put people in a box, right? Because we all are creative beings in our own right. I want you to think about when you go to purchase a dog or get a dog for your space, that there are certain breeds of dogs. Like if you lived on a farm, you would not probably get a Chihuahua. That just would not make sense. We know that they're small in size and they have a certain type of being that is very different than like a golden lab retriever, bigger, more friendly, probably, and especially like a German Shepherd, very smart, loyal, etc. And so when we think of human beings, the words or vernacular give us clarity on how to convey, communicate, and we tend to like to categorize. So it's just a nice tool, one of many. And I found this one to be spot on, like with big epiphanies of, oh, that makes sense in terms of how to see what we didn't see right in front, to then have an appreciation for the other. And that temperament, you are born a certain way, and that 40, as I said, 45 to 60% is your DNA. Like identical twin research is out there where they're separated at birth and they behave very similarly. And that's a DNA scientific piece. The other portion is environment.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions, so thank you very much, Tina, for spending time with us today. Our next webinar will be held on May 12th with Lisa Schaefer, speaking on reducing the stigma. So look for registration links on NICC's LinkedIn and Facebook pages. I do have one comment here, quick from Michael, along with several thank yous. Matching talent to task resonates. Any suggestions on how to quickly identify and group individuals for these tasks?
Yeah, I think, well, the first thing is Kiersey talks about this is to listen and observe, listen and observe. And so he did this in classrooms and at times of war. So when you have stressful situations, how does a person naturally react? They go into backup and they react either by acquiescing or through anger potentially, or being authoritative and making a decision. It can vary based on what's natural to them in stress. Whereas if they're getting a task done, some need to percolate, whereas others are quick to make decisions. That's real directive or informative. So the more you observe and the more you listen to how they use words, we have preferences. And it's really about compassionate listening, compassionate observation. And I think the biggest part of it is also just asking, having those crucial conversations where maybe you sit individually as well as with your team and say, what is it you love about your job? What is it that you enjoy doing? What do you want to do more of and less of? And how appreciative they will feel to actually have that question, because many times we can go through the day in the grind and have deadline after deadline, and they have task after task that maybe a fellow team member would rather be doing. And that was something when I was a professor at Creighton University, I always had my students have that conversation before they had a project to say, okay, what do you like doing? What are you good at and skilled at? And what would you prefer not to? And that really eliminated that whole issue of, or at least softened the stress of working in groups. And so they were like, okay, I'm great at research. I'm great at PowerPoint. I really enjoy creating and crafting story and crafting a good hook and closure. Knowing that really made it a lot more effective and efficient. And that's the key, right? Is efficiency and effectiveness in business. And thank you for that question, Michael. That's a very good question.
We have a couple more minutes with Tina if anyone else has a question.
And again, the analogy, the last thing out of the canoe, it's an analogy. So if you're like, that did not resonate with me at all, that's okay. It's just to put kind of a picture in your mind in a short amount of time, as to like potentially at the heart of it, what is it you care most about, that value? And then that branches out into behaviors and communication patterns.
Well, thank you again, Tina. You gave us a lot to think about today and how to better work with each other, right? So I appreciate everybody for logging on and joining us today, and hope that we see you at some of our upcoming webinars to come.